It's time for another episode of Tucson Means Business, featuring Tucson's top entrepreneurs and leaders in the business world. And now your host, Mark Bishop.
And welcome, everybody, to another Tucson Means Business, proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club on Tango Verde, east of Tucson. And a reminder, of course, people are playing golf. People drive by and they wonder why. The reality is separate carts and you stick to rules that you're asked to do, and you're out in the fresh air and so on. So, you don't touch flags or do this and that with bare hands. You might use a glove. Then secondly, the restaurant, the hidden jewel, which is normally packed and people love. But, of course, at the moment, it's sanitized every day and every night. But there's takeaway food. The hours aren't as long, but they're back in business. So, Rincon Mountain Grill, beautiful food. And that's, of course, at the 49ers Golf and Country Club, proud sponsor and have been for some time of Tucson Means Business, where we promote local businesses here in Tucson that go right across the world. We amplify their story. And I've got a very interesting guest today. You're going to enjoy this show. I've learned an awful lot from this fellow. His name is David Fruchtman. He's a PhD. He's director of the Walden Group LLC. And, I'm not going to spoil let the bird out of the cage here. We'll just get to it. So for my podcast today, this fellow was raised actually in a small village suburb of Toledo in Ohio. And he came to Arizona for college after working for a local police department. So I'd like to welcome David Walden, director of the Walden Group LLC. Hi, David.
Hi, Mark.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for taking time out. I know you're a busy fella.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
You've had a fascinating career, having worked in forensics, investigations for over 38 years, handling felony cases to include over 100 first-degree murder cases. Can you share any outstanding cases that you may have worked on?
I've been pleased to work on a number of high-profile cases. People who've been in Tucson for some time will remember years ago the Buddhist temple murder case up in Phoenix, where a group of young men from Tucson were accused based only on the statement of a person who was a mental patient at the time, and no other evidence. They were taken to Phoenix, interrogated improperly, I might add, to the point where they made false confessions. We worked on their defense, were able to find information that exonerated them. The Sheriff's Department in Maricopa County continued the investigation, spending millions of dollars. Eventually, they were all completely exonerated. The guilty parties who had no connection to them were found and prosecuted.
Well, thank God for that. But in the interim, millions of dollars of taxpayers' money wasted.
Absolutely. More recently, we were involved in the forensics of a case here in Tucson involving the police restraint of a young man. It was a fatal incident. We were able to provide the forensics, and the city has now settled that case, and several police officers who were involved resigned.
We're going to, as we go on in the show, we're going to go in depth with a few things. But before I forget, I'd like to say hi to your lovely wife, Wen Fruchtman. Hello, Wen. And listening today. And you've got two sons, Tyler and Matt, right?
Yes.
How old are those boys?
Tyler's 17, Matt's 13.
Let me ask you this. Would you want them to follow your career?
I don't know. It's a difficult up and down type of business from time to time. It's not an easy road. It's not an easy path to get into this kind of field. I'd want them to follow their passions. I don't know if I'd push them for this.
Interesting. Well, a polygraph examiner you've been for 35 years. You've tested as an expert in polygraph, DNA evidence, and forensic photography. Let's talk about some of that, David. Just how exact and true is polygraph testing?
The modern specific polygraph examination, properly conducted and properly scored, is about 92% accurate. And I'm taking this figure from a number of the latest research that's been done in controlled experiments. But polygraph is a tool. It is not an end-all, and critics are quick to point out that it's not 100%. What is 100%? Very few things that we deal with or look to are 100% accurate all the time. Polygraph is an important tool and often used to examine issues where there are no other available investigative techniques. Whether something has or has not occurred in the past is something that can be examined by a polygraph. And it would be very difficult when there's no crime scene. It's not a matter of maybe a criminal activity, but it may be verification of someone's words, an incident that may have happened or may not have happened, or proving the veracity of a witness's statement.
Now, when you watch TV shows and so on and movies, I always tend to start at the beginning of the questioning with asking their name or what street they're in or what building they're in. Is that sort of like the setter-upper on the machine, is it, to see if it's working on a true statement?
Well, in almost all polygraph examinations, the first question is usually a rather irrelevant question, and that's because people tend to react a little bit to the first audio stimulus in the examination. This is a very controlled psychophysiological experiment that's conducted with a polygraph test.
How does it, you strap these things on the arms and so on. How does it work? What does it read?
There's a part of our nervous system that we can control, and there's a part of our nervous system that we don't have control over. People like to think that they're in control of themselves, and to a good degree, part of them they're not in control of. You go out on a hot summer day here in Arizona, and you're going to perspire. And there's not a blessed thing that you can do about it because you don't control that part of your nervous system. And just like sweating is a nervous system reaction to the heat of the day, there's a particular reaction that happens when people lie. People are rather consistent in this. And from time to time, in our dealings with people, we'll encounter somebody who's trying to sell us something or trying to convince us of something, and we get that feeling that they're lying. And what's actually happening is we're seeing minute changes in that individual's nervous system that's below our threshold of conscious perception. The brain is seeing it and interpreting it, and it comes upon us as a feeling that I don't trust that person's word. These are psychophysiological reactions that are happening. And what a polygraph really does is read those aspects of the autonomic nervous system, that part of our nervous system that we can't control, and graphs it so that it can be analyzed.
Amazing. Now, the other side of it, of course, is it just movies? But I can beat the polygraph. You'd never know. I can be Steely Dan and, you'd never know that I was lying to you. Is that crap or is that real?
Well, it would be very, very difficult to control the psychophysiological aspects of a polygraph examination. Okay. And even with extensive training, the exam is designed to ferret out people who are attempting to manipulate the exam. It would be a very difficult prospect to do.
Okay, so Eddie Bond can do that. All right. Now, DNA evidence and forensic photography. Tell us about some of the behind-the-scenes discipline that goes on, David.
Well, let's start with DNA evidence.
Okay.
I've been called on a number of DNA cases because prosecutors are using DNA evidence more than ever right now. And DNA evidence comes in different levels of quality and different levels of specificity. DNA that's derived from blood, semen at a crime scene is certainly very, very incriminating. Far less incriminating is DNA that's referred to as touch DNA. And this is DNA that's left just by touching a surface, left on the skin cells of the fingers or the body. And the reason that this has very little evidentiary value is our DNA, touch DNA, is easily transferred. If I shake hands with you and you shake hands with somebody else, my DNA is now leaving on a third person, and I don't know whether they're going to a crime scene or not.
Right.
So the presence of someone's DNA, if we're talking about touch DNA, is not evidence of their presence at a crime or at the scene.
Okay.
And it's important to understand the context of this type of evidence.
So what about hair follicles and so on? What strength are they? Are they good or just,
Well, hair is unlikely to have nuclear DNA. Hair is going to have mitochondrial DNA, so it's going to have DNA from the mother's lineage, but it's not going to be absolutely unique DNA like nuclear DNA unless the hair root is pulled out. So hair that falls naturally is unlikely to be matched for DNA, even though you see things like that on television.
Sure.
That's them extending the science beyond reality.
All right, so bottom line, what's the best DNA?
The base DNA would be nuclear DNA. This would be the DNA that's unique to every individual.
Okay.
And that would not necessarily be present in the hair. And even though it may be present in skin cells for touch DNA, our touch DNA, again, is easily transferred. We don't know, your touch DNA may be in a lot of places right now. If it's in the wrong place, you could be accused of a crime.
Well, that's it. That's sort of what's worrying me a little bit because, you're miles away and yet you could be accused.
In photography and forensic photography specifically, there's advances now that allow us to document injuries in ways that we couldn't previously. Forensic photography sometimes involves photography for personal injury cases to document individuals' injuries and damages. And through forensic techniques such as reflective ultraviolet photography, we're able to photograph bruise injuries and soft tissue injuries that may have healed up to 6 months ago. So we're able to go back in time and see pattern injuries that may not have been documented at the original time of the injury.
Fascinating, folks, isn't it? I mean, you went into teaching, actually, after years of investigations, and in fact worked as chair of a criminal justice program. What did that involve?
Well, it involved setting up a criminal justice curriculum leading to an associate's and bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And we set up a program that was very, very hands-on. So the people coming through did skill building that's going to be important to the next generation of criminal justice professionals. The type of scenario-based skill building and evidence collection that's going to make them effective with the techniques and the expectations of the 21st century.
You learned all this hands-on early days in your career, right?
I did. I went to school for this as well, but a lot of it comes from learning and being out in the field.
So when you left teaching full-time, you moved back into the private sector, offering a unique combination of professional services. So... and if you just joined, by the way, it's Tucson Means Business on Tucson Business RadioX with Mark Bishop. And my special guest is David Fruchtman. He's director of the Walden Group of companies here in Tucson. And if you're wondering, well, is this guy really qualified? Well, this is what he's attained, all right? Bachelor's in Psychology, University of Arizona. He's a Master of Science in Criminal Justice at the University of Alabama. A Master's in Forensic Science at the National University, and Master of Science in Psychology at Walden University, and PhD in Psychology at Walden University. That's not your own, is it? You didn't build that thing, no. And he still teaches. He teaches forensics, criminal justice, and psychology at Colorado State Uni, American Intercontinental University, and Southern New Hampshire University, and South University. You're in demand, aren't you?
Well, it's a busy time right now. There's a lot of people looking for professional careers, and they're young people who are willing to dedicate themselves to public safety. And I think they need all the support they can get.
The Walden Group itself now is a multidisciplinary group of professional investigators and forensic specialists offering a unique variety of services here in Tucson. Now, what type of services do you actually offer?
Well, we perform investigative and forensic services for individuals, businesses, attorneys, government agencies. Our investigative services may include, but certainly aren't limited to, background investigations, criminal defense investigations, fraud and theft cases, investigation of sex crimes and violent crimes, civil matters, regulatory matters, employment discrimination, sexual harassment, personal injury, professional malpractice. It runs quite a large gamut.
Doesn't it ever? The whole gamut. Let's just look at a couple of full and quick examples on them, David, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
We talk about individuals. Okay, investigative and forensic services. Individuals, you, I, Johnny Smith down the street, Mary up the road. Okay, she'd come to the business or the company and want what and why?
Well, any number of reasons that people might hire a private investigator. They might need additional information, or they may want to know an individual's background that they intend to engage in a personal or business relationship with. They may find themselves accused of a crime, a civil wrong of some sort, a regulatory violation, and they may need evidence collected for their defense. They may have suffered a
what
loss,
do people do?
a
Do
theft.
they know about this? What do people do if they didn't know about you?
A lot of people will call law enforcement, and if law enforcement isn't adequately following up on their matter, then they'll call a private investigator.
Ah, okay. So that's what it goes. What about attorneys? Is that sort of like finding out stuff for them, for someone they're defending?
Well, in criminal defense cases, absolutely. Where the police are the investigators for the prosecution, the defense has private investigators that collect evidence and interview witnesses for the defense.
Mm-hmm. How does forensic services come into play for individuals, though?
Forensic services were really limited to people in public safety in the police department. And now people have seen the value of forensic science in proving things and in resolving situations. And we give individuals an opportunity to use forensic services for their own purposes.
That's amazing. Now, we talk about background investigations, criminal defense investigations, fraud and theft investigations. Isn't this all aren't they police matters?
To a good extent they are, but police departments right now simply aren't able to give individuals the private attention that they may need in their particular matter. They're spread very, very thin, and in a lot of cases there's a lack of follow-up.
Yeah, well, okay, so you're really filling a gap, aren't you?
Absolutely. And in civil matters, the police aren't going to get involved in employment discrimination or sexual harassment matters.
Right.
The police aren't going to get involved in the
They've got
situation.
enough on their plate without that, right? I know
Absolutely.
it shouldn't be looked at secondary, but they've got enough to do. Have you personally worked on any of those? I mean, aren't they difficult? Aren't they sort of, you got to tread very warily, the sexual harassment ones and the, employment discrimination?
Absolutely. A lot of times a company or a business will want to hire an outside investigator to review a case and to do the investigation so that there's no allegations of internal bias against an employee or a claimant in a sexual harassment case, so that the investigator isn't looking as being overly concerned with limiting the liability of the employer rather than getting to the facts.
Well, it makes sense. It absolutely. And folks, if that's not enough that you do, you also collect and process and analyze evidence, right? Now, this is done for whom?
Well, we have businesses where a theft has occurred and they may want the fingerprints processed. They may want fingerprints collected. People may want DNA analyzed or collected. Somebody may want a paternity test done without having to go through a formal blood collection. We would be able to do that. We would be able to.
All right, just let me hold you there on that one. The first thing that came to my mind then was proof of, not ownership, but proof of being a father, proof of being a mother. I mean, do they come into play?
They absolutely could.
Yeah. Do you get many of those? I mean,
it happens from time to time.
Time to time, yeah. Interesting. Anything else?
We have had people who have submitted for drug analysis. I had somebody recently submit a hair sample of an individual for drug analysis, and we'll be able to tell them what's going on. Okay.
So in a case like that with employment, they're in their right to deny, aren't they? If it comes out positive that there is drug involvement of the potential employee, the person can honestly say, well, we'd prefer not to hire you and not be in trouble for it.
I would tell them to contact their employment attorney for legal advice. That's okay. one of the few things you see left off this sheet.
Well, you perform forensic consultation to include polygraph services, latent fingerprint processing. Now, what is latent fingerprint processing?
Latent fingerprints means developing fingerprints on a surface so they can be seen, lifted, and compared.
There's an appropriate siren going for us right there. Now, DNA collection and processing. How does your lab have all of that? You can actually process DNA?
We send DNA processing out. We do the preparation of the samples for the laboratory. But that's a kind of a specialty area.
What about, I was going to ask you about, how does trace evidence work in analysis? Has that got to do with firearms mainly, or?
It can have to do with firearms. It can have to do with soils. It can have to do with transfer and impression evidence for tool marks, paint transfer. There's any number of different types of trace evidence that could associate an instrument with a location or a victim with a scene.
Okay. Now, I did touch on weapons. You see it in the movies again. It's the only thing I can make reference to. But this business of soaring off serial numbers and so on, if that happens, is it hopeless now to identify where the weapon came from, or is there still a way of doing that?
No, it's actually relatively easy. We can restore serial numbers using either acid or high-powered magnetics right in our lab.
Well, there you go. So that's a fallacy now, isn't it, this business of getting rid of it?
It is.
Okay. By the way, I'm speaking with David Fruchtman, who is the director of the Walden Group LLC here in Tucson. Private individuals, surveillance equipment now. Now, surveillance equipment. There's legal, illegal, states, some yes, some no, something. Where are we at in Arizona? What can I do? As an individual, what am I allowed to do?
Well, we follow the 1969 Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act in Arizona. So this is a one-party consent state. So you are free to record any conversation that you are a part of or one party consents to. You can't record individuals who don't know they're being recorded. One person has to be aware of the recording.
So I can't record phone calls for evidence if I needed it for a court case later or something like that, unless I ask permission to record.
No, you could record the phone call as long as you are a participant in the phone call.
But what about the person I'm speaking with that doesn't know they're being recorded?
That would be something he doesn't legally have to be told.
And I couldn't get into trouble for it.
No, and it could be used as evidence.
Okay, that's that one. That can be, rather important. What about other sorts of, you see different things online and so on, but apparently you have a good retail setup with the other side of the business, because we did talk about multidisciplinary early. What else do you have that is wanted by the public?
People come in for small covert cameras. Somebody may be trespassing. There may be thefts or intrusion into somebody's private residence or business. They may come in with a camera to find out who's involved with something like that. Sometimes you want very obvious cameras. Other times you want cameras that are covert. People may use covert recording equipment, things like this, for if they're being sexually harassed on a job, in order to pick up the evidence of that so that a case can go forward. There are times when people want to do some of their investigation themselves, and they need the equipment to do that with.
And they're allowed to do that?
They are indeed.
All right, because to me this seems like a bit of an open field, and I'd be concerned. Now, you see, and you read about stories where perverts got hold of these cameras, put them into bathrooms, put them into motel rooms, put them into hotel rooms, whatever. What's Arizona? Where's Arizona's stance on this?
Well, that would be a serious crime. I mean, it'd be both a federal and a state crime.
Really?
To invade someone's privacy like this, and this would be in violation of the statute we were just talking about.
Okay. Right.
And we do sell instruments that can turn up cameras. Instruments that can find hidden cameras and can notify people of transmitters or can nullify GPS devices that may be placed on someone's car.
So I could come down, buy this particular equipment, go to a hotel, go to a motel, go anywhere I wanted to, maybe a conference room, something important, legal, and I could, sweep that particular room and find out how can it find out if cameras are looking at me, though?
Cameras are using CCD chip technology now, and they have a reflection to infrared light. So a camera detector can see that reflection in the chip.
How about that? And recording equipment and so on?
It's got to be transmitted out. There is recording equipment that's going to go directly to digital devices that would be very difficult to find.
Is there much going on today?
Well, the prices have come down on these kind of things, and it's within the reach of a lot of people that this, and it's accessible to a lot of people that it wouldn't have normally been. So privacy is limited today, perhaps more than ever before.
Probably the one that comes to mind for me is my missus playing up. My good old cheese and kisses I love to death, but I've just got this feeling she's having an affair. What would I do? And let's say it's Vicky Verka. Let's say she's got it on me. What would we be able to get, per se, in a full gamut of products from you that I would want to get to make my case?
You may want to put a covert camera at the house. You may want a camera that looks like an alarm clock. You may want a camera that's easily hidden that could record something like this happening. You may want to collect a garment and have it analyzed for DNA evidence that isn't your DNA. You may want to ask your spouse if they'd come in for a polygraph test. People do.
They do?
Absolutely.
By God, you don't want to be strong on that one. Then we'd have to be... Okay, so that's cameras. What else? What about car following or tracing where you're parked or where your car is now?
There are GPS devices available that can provide you with the location of a vehicle. They're available for both lease and purchase.
Well, and then now this is the Spy Shop. What's this called, this division?
Well, it's Tucson Spy Shop is part of the Walden Group.
Okay, Tucson Spy Shop. Alrighty. Where is this? Where is this? They tell me. I can hear people say. It all seems rather fascinating, David. I mean, do you ever get bored?
You know, it's one of these type of careers where every day is different. I get to meet people from a wide variety of walks of life and perspective, and I really enjoy that. People come in with unique problems, and we do our best to see if we can't provide information to assist them in solving those problems.
Do you ever get into trouble? I mean, you're providing a service, and it's for an ethical cause, and all other than the other side of the business when it comes to this particular stuff. Do people get upset? Do they want to hurt you? Do they blame you for anything? I mean, do you have much of that in the business?
Well, it's certainly happened before. I mean, people will put the blame on the person who's uncovered their misdeeds rather than taking responsibility for their own misdeeds. But that hasn't been a significant problem. I'm pretty careful about separating my business and my personal life.
Tell me about what are the most wanted scenarios? I mean, like an example of is it affairs for divorcing? There's a lot of divorce in America, right? 52% or something of all divorces, right?
Absolutely.
What's the biggest thing? I'm trying to find out. Is it playing up on somebody? Is it lying? What's the most prolific thing that comes forward to you when people come in with this?
Well, I mean, people come in with both personal situations as well as people come in who have been accused of something. And it may be a personal matter. It may be a criminal matter. It may be a civil issue. But people do have issues in their personal life. They want to use an investigator to solve those. Perhaps they need to know what's going on with their significant other, and they don't want to be the last person to know. And that's certainly very reasonable.
Fair enough. Wow. I hope you're enjoying this show in Tucson Means Business, this podcast. It's with David Fruchtman, director of the Walden Group LLC here in Tucson, proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club. And here's a short message from them. You're listening to Tucson Means Business on Tucson Business RadioX right here, coming out of the Stewart Title building on Broadway. And, of course, we're proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club, a wonderful course and wonderful club here in Tucson. I have the Director of Memberships and Tournaments, Casey Polivchak. Casey, tournaments are a big thing for a golf club.
Absolutely. We are a semi-private club, which means we have membership available, but we also are open to the public. With being open to the public, we welcome nonprofit tournaments, fundraisers. We specialize in groups from 4 to 144.
See, this is an important thing, isn't it, in the community? Companies would love to do something for their staff, something that's different, but they don't want the course to be too hard, and they want it to be friendly. They want the service to be right, and the atmosphere to make it a really fun day.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
And that's what you strive to do, isn't it? It's part of your whole job, really.
I think that's what we specialize in is the, how am I going to say this? The tournament that's not looking at spending too much money because they're in it to make money for their charity.
Right.
So we offer really good facilities, a great golf course. But I'm going to be honest, it's not the best golf course in Tucson. It's not the nicest facilities, but everything is good out there, and your guests are going to have a good experience because of the value that they're getting for the cost of the tournament.
There you go. That's an important factor. It's all very well, wanting to have a great day out for everybody, but if it breaks the bank, then it defeats the whole purpose.
Absolutely.
And if you're trying to raise funds, which is an integral part, because Tucson seems to be a wonderful place for raising funds, there's so many people who support so many wonderful causes.
Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of, great causes out there. And, people they kind of come to a fork in the road. You got school sponsorships that, booster clubs. There's so many fundraising possibilities out there that we really have specialized in golf tournaments for people and helping them maximize the amount of money they can make. Mm-hmm. I've put together a brochure to help people that have never run a golf tournament that will kind of take them from step one until the day of the event.
That's very, very good. If people from somewhere now, maybe they're moving into Tucson with a new business, new company, whatever, how can they get hold of you directly?
They can call me directly at 520-749-4925. Extension's 212, but we recommend you go to the website. It's a great way to get information about the club on not only golf tournaments but membership. That website is 49ercc.com. FORTYNINERCC.com.
There you go. Casey Bolivchak. He's the Director of Memberships and Tournaments. He's the fellow to speak to. Now back to the show. And we're back. Is the private investigation field like what we see portrayed on television?
Oh, my, no. I'm amused by what I see on television. But to a good degree, you see my day would be like a normal business person's day, and it wouldn't usually include a high-speed car chase and a shootout, like is portrayed on every TV show. You see that TV private investigators commit numerous felonies in the course of their investigation. Mm-hmm. And then, there are times when people come in having unrealistic expectations where they think that perhaps we can just break into someone's home and rifle through their things to find out what's going on.
Right.
That's certainly not going to happen.
No. How are our laws for Arizona overall?
As far as our criminal laws?
Anything and everything that we've touched on.
Our criminal laws in Arizona are stricter in punishment than many of our states. Our Title 13 state criminal rules are pretty straightforward and are very understandable, but Arizona takes a very conservative stance on crime.
When you see them operating the polygraph on television, is it accurately portrayed?
Oh, it drives me crazy.
That too, huh?
You see them operate what they, in air quotes, call a polygraph on the dating shows or on daytime television.
Right.
And I see them working. I see people who are actors, who are playing these roles and hyping up the drama, doing things that would be irresponsible, using equipment that we haven't used in 25 years.
Right.
And it's a lot of showmanship. And then when people want to use this for their personal use, I have to explain that, you can't go through a laundry list of issues on an exam and it doesn't, there's not just a green and red light and
How long does a normal test take?
About an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so a person's put in a chair, and from what I see, there are certain things, your arms are strapped or things are strapped onto your arms, and then there's also like those in a hospital, those little things that you put on either on your hands or your arms or what are they? What's the procedure?
Well, there are two tubes that are attached to the chest and the abdomen that measure breathing. There are electrodes that are connected to the fingers, and there's the little clip that's on the middle finger that's kind of like the doctor uses to take your pulse when you go in for a checkup. Additionally, there's a blood pressure cuff that's put on the arm, and that's pumped up partially during the examination. Now, all the questions are reviewed ahead of time. There's no trick questions. There's no surprise questions. It's not an interrogation. It's an examination. It's a very controlled examination to determine the truth.
Let's talk about private investigators. They're around. They're here in Tucson. They're in every city, aren't they, across America?
Absolutely.
Is the business booming these days, or are they struggling?
I think the business continues to increase as more and more demands are put on public services. We see increased demands in the private sector.
I used to love some of the TV shows in the 70s and 60s and 80s of private investigators. Not quite like that in real life, I can imagine. What's the majority of their work? Sitting in cars, snooping, or what?
Depending on the specialty and depending on the practice, there are practices that do an awful lot of matters such as workman's compensation claims that would be heavily involving watching individuals who have claims and surveillances.
This is like the guy who's pretending he can't walk or had an accident at work.
Precisely.
And there he is bowling with his mates or doing something else. Okay, and that'll be interesting. So why do people hire a private investigator?
Well, again, they may be in a situation where they have a problem, and information can assist them in resolving that problem. Information is power in our society, and that's long been known by people who have been very, very successful power brokers. People know that information is power, and most of that has been restricted, and this allows people who are average people to leverage that power that knowledge gives, that power that knowing someone's background before you get involved with them, being able to provide for your defense when accused.
Now, all sorts of cases, they vary. Maybe a child runs away from home. That would be a case for a private investigator?
A private investigator could assist.
Because the police can't do everything, can they?
You know, they're sometimes held back by policies and procedures that they have to follow, and there are times when we can assist them in doing the things that they can't do.
Give me some other cases that they'd be involved, because it sounds like a fascinating, career to be in.
People call up for, we do a tremendous amount, again, in forensics, we do a tremendous amount of autopsies. There are times when people call up for that type of a service.
Seriously, I thought the coroner did all of that.
Well, the coroner will do autopsies on cases that are legally mandated to be autopsied, such as people who die in police custody, but they are also going to be selecting those cases where they suspect that there's some criminal element.
Well, what about car crashes?
They may or may not decide to do an autopsy. Usually they will in in a car crash case, especially if there's any indication that there may have been some impairment.
See, this is a world a lot of people don't know anything about, I included. I mean, one tends to think if you died of a heart attack at hospital, they've got to prove that this was the case, so you've got to, go through an autopsy. You were in a fight and someone put a gun on you and they shot you, you've got to go through an autopsy to prove indeed that it was the bullets that killed you or whatever it is. Usually it's the heart stops, right?
Right.
Because of the pain or because of the shock, I guess.
Well, in all of them, the heart stops.
All of them, right, okay. So I'm trying to get, to understand when is not an autopsy.
Well, a victim who's been shot is probably going to go through an autopsy, but an individual who dies of a heart attack at a hospital, it's unlikely that they're going to have an autopsy.
What about a death through COVID?
Potentially not.
Okay.
There's no law that mandates that all unattended deaths are autopsied in Arizona.
Wow.
The medical examiner determines which cases they're going to take and which cases they're going to pass on. But a family may still want autopsy services done.
Would a private investigator who's been hired to follow a husband or a wife because of fear of playing up or whatever, when they take photographs? Right, they're allowed to do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, and they can present that evidence, right, in a folder to the person that hired them?
Yes.
There's no law to stop them doing that or anything else. It's too bad if they're caught or anything. What sort of money do they get paid an hour these days then to sit around all night in the cold and maybe sneak up to a house and a window and take those photographs?
Oh, private investigation services start at perhaps $90 an hour and up, depending on the services that are being provided.
Okay, so they vary. the hardship of the job, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fair enough, too.
And when you're out in public, you're likely to be watched. You're likely to be photographed. You sacrifice a bit of your privacy when you walk out in public.
It's getting more, isn't it?
Absolutely.
In England right now, David, there's virtually a camera on every corner. And a lot of that was to stop fights, late hours, murders and so on. Then terrorism came into it. I'm a great believer of it. If you've got nothing to hide, who cares?
Exactly.
Look all you want. Just don't come into my home.
Exactly.
That's the thing there. Why would someone need a private autopsy when the county medical examiners, you've really explained that. I mean, it comes down to just depending on the death.
Well, they may want to find the cause for their personal closure. They may want to identify if there was malpractice, if there was negligence at the care home that this individual was at.
Okay.
They may want to establish if there's some kind of a genetic information that their physician needs to know about and be careful to watch. There's any number of reasons that somebody may come to us for autopsy services.
When we say for someone to come to you, we're talking about Mr. and Mrs. Public.
Right.
And my mum has died. I'm not happy. She was in this particular home. I'm a little concerned, and I want to pay you to do an autopsy to make sure that it was all kosher how she went.
Well, we could certainly see what the proximate cause of death was. We would look to see if there was any indications of mistreatment, malnourishment.
And all this can be seen. All this can be seen, right?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
And this is the type of evidence that one would need to collect if they were looking at some kind of a malpractice or personal injury case.
Right. Fabulous. So tell us, David, right now in your business, who's using the polygraph services and why?
Well, we have police departments that are hiring right now, and they're required to conduct a pre-employment polygraph examination on their applicants.
Okay.
We have people who come in with private issues, personal matters that they want to show that they're telling the truth on. And we have people who've come in for criminal defense who may find themselves accused or may believe that an investigation is ensuing where they will be accused of a crime, and they may want to come in and have an examination done.
So who manufactures these machines? Are they German or overseas or American made or what?
They are, to a great degree, they're American made. As far as I know, the instruments that we use are made in Indiana, and there are several other American manufacturers.
Do you need a license or some sort of qualification? I mean, could I just open up and put a shingle out and start doing polygraphs? Or?
Years ago, the licensing was very similar for polygraph examiners as it was for private investigators, and with a rather strict policies and regulations. And the law on that has expired. So literally now, as unfortunate as it is, somebody could set up shop without qualifications and without the proper training, without graduating from an American Polygraph Association approved school, and open up as some kind of a charlatan.
Yeah, well, there's enough of those around without doing that. How much information can someone find? In fact, I wanted to ask you, how do you find people? How do you locate people?
We start with databases that are proprietary, that are restricted from the general public's use and are screened for use by licensed investigation agencies. A lot of people will attempt to find people on social media, or they'll use some of these inexpensive background investigations that are offered to them online, and they're usually disappointed with the results. And then when they come to us, we're able to search in a much wider scope information that can lead to someone's background information.
Well, there's things online, don't you? I mean, you pay for a fee. That you only find that out after you've sat there for 15 minutes when they've assessed everything. I don't think that's right, that a person's life should just be public to the world. All from your tickets to your felonies to God knows what. I mean, when is privacy?
Well, you also have to think about people's right to know who they're dealing with. I mean, when people are involved in the criminal justice system, this becomes a public record. This becomes a public record by intention so that it can be searched. And there are ways to address these records. If somebody's not happy with them, there are ways to challenge these records. But if they're true and accurate records, then they need to be out in the public.
Well, David, let me ask you this, and how much information can someone find out about another person, in a background investigation?
If someone was just curious about an individual and they came to us with some basic information, we'd be able to identify that individual, their birth date, their vital numbers, every place that they've lived, any property that they own, any liens, any foreclosures, any criminal involvement. We'd be able to see every place that they've lived, every car that they've driven. We'd be able to see their relatives, their associates. There are actually database searches that can tell where you frequent.
Wow. Talk about an open book, huh? Why would the average person really need to purchase covert cameras or spy gear?
There are people who, even right now, are the victims of sexual harassment at work. And unless they have some documentation on this, their claims are unlikely to go forward. If they come and they purchase a covert recording device and they are able to catch something like this, then they're able to make a claim that's going to stick and get the proper relief that they deserve to have in a situation like that. And a lot of times people are in situations where their interaction with somebody else is the only documentation they could possibly have. We have people who have come in and purchased a camera that would fit on a keychain because they have contentious child custody exchanges with their ex, and they just wanted to record that so that the next court hearing was not a he said, she said. There's a video.
Well, it makes sense from that point of view, and there's nothing stopping her doing that to him, or Vicky Verka, right?
Right.
Okay. When I was a kid watching Dick Tracy and Perry Mason, I thought it might be fun to be a private dick, I got to tell you. How does one get into the private investigation field if they'd like to?
In Arizona, to open an agency, to get an agency license, it requires at least 3 years of full-time experience as an investigator, and people usually get that experience either working for an agency or working for a government agency, either a state, local, or federal investigation agency.
3 years of like hands-on.
Right.
Okay. And what about the theory? What about study? What's involved there? There's so many different pathways in and specialties within the field. There's not a state test that they take that assesses any particular specific knowledge. It's the experience that they verify. There's bonding, there's insurance, there's those requirements, right. Fingerprints, and a background investigation. But a lot of people will go to work for an agency as an employee in order to get those 3 years of experience. Well, that makes sense, and there's a good way to do it. Look, it's been absolutely fascinating. I could talk with you all day on this stuff, I tell you now, but if you're interested at all, listeners, it's go to the site so you learn a lot there. Walden Group, it's www.waldengroupllc.com. That's the URL, that's the website, okay, of the organization. If you want to go to LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Dr/David-Fruchtman-309 and on it goes. But you can get him on LinkedIn, read all about him, okay? And he's a very approachable guy. You're welcome to talk to him at any time. Give him a call if he can help you in any way, shape, or form. It's been absolutely fascinating. And then, of course, the other side of things, if we've talked your cork in reference to any of those machines or spy cameras, or imagine a camera on a car key. Well, I tell you what I would like it for. I'm at Safeway and some idiot slams his door into my car and I've got no proof. I can't do anything and he just gives me the finger. Now I can shoot his registration number, show the actual thing on my car, and maybe even show him doing it, whatever. So there we go. David Fruchtman, director of the Walden Group. Special guest today, my guest on this particular podcast of Tucson Means Business, proudly sponsored by the 49ers Golf and Country Club. And you know what, David? It's been absolutely thrilling having you, and I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Join us again, won't you, for another Tucson Means Business. I'm your host, Mark Bishop, and it's been a pleasure having you.